So good morning, everyone. Welcome back from the break. Our next speaker is Swinburne University's inaugural chief scientist. She's also a radio astronomer at the Center for Astrophysics and Supercomputing at Swinburne University. And her particular area of interest and study is tracing the evolution of the galaxy. And this is by studying neutral hydrogen particles, molecules. We're not sure, but I'm fascinated to hear how she does that. Please join me in welcoming Professor Virginia Kilborn.
Thank you very much.
Let's see, just progress isn't there.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much for the introduction. And whilst I am a radio astronomer and I do study neutral hydrogen atoms, I'm not going to talk about that in this talk other than that very, very small introduction. So my background is in radio astronomy, but about 5 or 6 years ago, with the increasing interest in space, and especially interest in space in Australia, I started working on some space research and space education. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the activities that we've been doing in Victoria and at Swinburne in this area. Before I go any further,
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where Swinburne is, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people, who are the traditional owners of the land on where we are today. So, as I mentioned, about 5 or 6 years ago, we started working at Swinburne on some space research. And one of the areas that we've been looking at is microgravity research, which is really what we're here for today. When you go into space, you will be in a 0G or a micro-G environment for most of your trip, apart from the launch, I guess, and any of those little adjustments that you might make in space. And so it's really important that we understand not only how the body works in microgravity, but also all of the systems around us, from engineering to biological plants. So how are we going to grow food? How are we going to pump liquids through a tube? I don't know. There's so many different things that we need to understand in microgravity. So there was a number of us in Melbourne who are working on different aspects of microgravity research. And so we have researchers from Melbourne Uni, Swinburne, Deakin, RMIT and Monash who've come together to form a consortium. And by consortium, that just means we all work together so that we can have access to microgravity and also for educational purposes. So our main aims for this consortium are to provide access to space, and then we come together to enable training and expertise and capability in the life sciences in experimentation, and to build that workforce. So we know that in the next, by about 2030, I think the aim is we're expecting to have at least 20,000 people employed in the space industry. And so we're working together in the university sector to try and train people to be ready to take on the jobs and to participate in that workforce. Obviously, we want to provide education and inspiration to students at all levels and make an impact on communities. And that's what we're all here for. We're not, we're all here to be interested in this, but we also want to make a difference here on Earth. So some of the areas that we're able to access for our microgravity experiments are here. And each of us at the different universities bring a different element. So I'll just start on the right. The ISS, we've heard a great talk this morning about ISS research. And at Swinburne, we've been sending experiments for about 5 or 6 years up to the ISS. Where we've been actually having student experiments and Dr. Rebecca Allen will be talking after me, and she'll tell you about our student experiments and our microgravity experiments on the ISS. We've got sounding rockets. So in a second, I'm going to tell you about some research that La Trobe is doing with sounding rockets. We've got parabolic flights, which is being relayed out of RMIT, and Being Systems, which is a new provider of parabolic flights in Australia. We think it's the first one in Australia. Really exciting, and they've already had their first flight. Down the bottom, suborbital flights. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. And then, so these are all sort of your space type ways of accessing microgravity. We've also got things like drop towers. This is the drop tower in Bremen, which is about, I think it's 150 meters tall and provides about 4.5 seconds of microgravity. But you can also do some simulations of microgravity, and at Swinburne we've just got two new bioreactors where we can simulate microgravity, so we can do experiments on the desktop before we take it up to space, which is obviously much more expensive and has a much higher failure rate. So we want to do as much testing as we can on Earth. And at Deakin, the Universal Motion Simulator, which is a very big simulator where you can actually sit in the end of this device and control the amount of G that you have. So this is really good for things like training astronauts, pilots, and but also we hope to use it for experiments in the future. One of the really interesting things, of course, is if we're trying to test things in microgravity, we actually have to bring it from Earth where it may have, had some sort of formation. So, for example, if you're growing crystals, if they start forming on Earth, then they might have been put onto a path that will be different to if they just started in space. But also we have this launch where you have a very, very high G. And so understanding how our systems handle the launch is really important for us. So things like the Universal Motion Simulator that Saeed has here at Deakin are really critical for that. We're really excited to have a lecturer at Swinburne, Kim Ellis-Hayes, who has now undergone training to become an astronaut on the suborbital flights, particularly Virgin Galactic. And so she will be able to do run experiments for us, and we'll be doing that in the coming years. She's trained through the POSSUM program in the US and is really an ambassador for women in STEM here in Australia and in the US. But very, very exciting for us to have this capability that we can, I guess, link into, and really shows that the space activities that we take are not just located in Australia. These are really international events, and, bearing in mind, I know we've got a lot of internationals in the audience. So we do have that focus on what can we do here, but how do we link back into that larger ecosystem? I'm going to tell you a little bit about some research that's just happening now at La Trobe University. This is headed by Professor Patrick Humbert, who's the head of the LIMS area there. And so what they've been doing is looking at these really small organisms called trichoplax. And he's been launching these into microgravity. And the idea is to really understand the impact of microgravity on the regeneration of cancer cells in this really simple animal. And if you haven't heard of trichoplax, they're really, really cool. They're one of the most ancient multicellular organisms. So they're like a living fossil, I guess. And there's only about 20,000 cells per animal. If you take one of the trichoplax and cut it in half, it will regenerate. And so it's actually really robust. And what Patrick has been doing is doing some, as we were talking about, some on-ground experiments using microgravity simulation using a 2D clinostat. As you can see here, so 5 minutes and 60 minutes and 12 hours. And then he's actually just very recently used this sounding rocket, and this is a collaboration with DLR, and he's then launched the trichoplax to see how they perform in microgravity from a sounding rocket, where you get probably 6 minutes free fall. There you go. And so the thing about this is we can actually understand this animal, we can understand how cells regenerate and so on, but also it gives us an idea of how good our lab-based experiments are when we're comparing them to actual freefall or actual microgravity or zero-G environments. And that's really important for us because we'd like to do, hundreds and thousands of different experiments, but the access to space is limited. So if we can do as much as we can on Earth, then that will really help us progress our research. Someone mentioned this morning about the fantastic news that the ARC Centre for Excellence in Plants for Space has been funded. And just to give you an idea of the sort of things that will happen in that Centre of Excellence. So for those who don't know what a Centre of Excellence is, the ARC is the Australian Research Council. They fund centres of excellence which bring together multiple universities and multiple industry partners to progress a particular field. You typically get about $30 to $35 million over a 7-year period. So this one has just been announced as being funded. And it's going to cover things like food, plants, and then all that engineering around how do you grow food and plants in space. And they've got 4 main topics: plants, products, processes, and people. So if you're interested, this will be a really fantastic one for you to get involved in. There'll be a heap of activity. And not only will there be a lot of research, there will be a lot of outreach coming with that as well. So obviously bringing together all of these microgravity opportunities gives you lots of opportunities in space life sciences. And I just wanted to give a shout out to my collaborator, Bruce Thompson, who's here in the audience and will be talking tomorrow. We wrote an article on this earlier in the year about how space life sciences are so important in Australia and really will provide a lot of opportunities for research, but also advancing the health of humans here on Earth. And also those educational opportunities. So speaking of education, for the rest of the talk, I'm just going to talk about some of the educational programs that we have at Swinburne and why we've set them up in a slightly different way to a normal degree. And so what we've done is we've looked at a scaffolded learning model of education at Swinburne and a just-in-time model as well, where we are looking at what is the requirement in the space industry and what are the requirements for education at different stages of that journey. We've talked with industry partners before setting this up. So we spent a lot of time, about 2 years, going to talk to space industry partners about what do they need in the workforce. And we said, well, we're thinking of doing a space science degree. Would you hire our space scientists? A lot of people said, yes, absolutely. But a lot of our industry partners said, yes, we need scientists, but we also need engineers, we need medical practitioners, we need health experts, we need chemists, you name it. And of course, if you have a look at something like SpaceX, and their job ads, half of them are marketing and business development. And so you actually need the full spectrum of skills in the space industry. So rather than setting up a space science degree, we've set up a space technology co-major where anybody across the university can come as an undergraduate, study your main degree. It might be law, it might be physics, it might be engineering, or it might be health. And you take 8 units in the space technology co-major, and you learn to apply your discipline to the space discipline. So that is our undergraduate program. We've designed it so that we can then make all of the delivery into micro units. So we'll be providing opportunities for business and industry to upskill staff who might be working in industries and want to move into the sector. But we also provide that really crucial inspiration and opportunities at the high school level, which is what Rebecca's going to talk about in the next talk. So just to give you an overview of some of the topics that we cover. Our space technology degree co-major gives us the students the opportunity to work with industry in their undergraduate degree. There's no mathematics or science prerequisites, so everybody will be coming into the class together, other than what you need to enroll into your own degree, obviously. And one of the beautiful things about this is that you'll actually have physicists working with business students, working with engineers and health scientists to solve problems together. And this is kind of how it works in the real world. So we think this is going to be a good training for them. The first 4 units that students will take are their coursework units, all delivered fully online. We've got general space applications unit, so that just tells students what is the space sector like today. And a lot of kids might come out of school and think, I'm going to go work with NASA, that's my pathway, but that's not just the only pathway to, which it's a great pathway. I love NASA, don't get me wrong, but it's not the only pathway to space. And in fact, there are many, many more jobs right across the sector. We talk about law. It's really, really important to understand the legal, where you are legally, I guess, if you're doing any projects. And then we've got a couple of units, one on space microgravity and science, which Rowena is kindly teaching into, and data visualization, and we'll be adding new units as we go. And then the second half of the course is all industry engagement. And so students will be working directly with industry to do complete projects that the industry have given us. So by the time they leave, they'll have worked with 3 industry partners, including the challenge-based innovation program with CERN. So in summary, what we've been doing in Victoria is coming together in the sector, realising we have to work together because some of the challenges that we have in space are really huge. And we think by working together, we'll actually be able to multiply our efforts. We've been working really, really hard on the educational aspects. And we have a microgravity workshop for anybody who's interested in hearing more about microgravity and potentially giving a talk or participating. Please, there's the contact details down there. The website is microgravityworkshop.eventbrite.com.au, so it should be pretty easy to remember. The end of this month, all welcome, and I think you can probably attend online, I'm going to say. And that's all from me. Thank you very much.